Hello, and welcome to the Autistic Me podcast. I am Christopher Scott Wyatt. Once again, I'm being joined by Professor Dayna Goldstein. In this episode, we're going to talk about something we have both experienced, and that is the trauma or joy, it's a bit of both, of purchasing a new house and preparing to relocate. Welcome to the podcast, Professor Goldstein.
Hi, it's good to be here.
All right, so if I may I call you Dayna for the remainder of the 15 minutes?
Sure, that'd be lovely, Chris.
So you just started the process of purchasing a house. You hope to close soon. Can you explain why purchasing or renting a place to live is so difficult for those of us who are neurodiverse?
Sure. I mean, obviously, home buying is always difficult, right? We all wish it were easier. We all wish it were cheaper. We all wish interest rates weren't ridiculous. So there's lots just off the top that I think applies to everyone searching for a home, right? It's just frustrating. I think neurodiverse people have a few additional considerations. So specifically for me, I really cannot live near a campus where there's busy humdrum noise every day. So quiet is very important to me. I have distinct feelings and uses for every single space and every single house I look at. So I plan ahead and decide what space would do what in what area and under what conditions it would be acceptable to use such things. And I'm in my head designing a whole system of how the house would flow. And so while everyone else just says, well, it's 3-bedroom and 2-bath, why don't you like it? I'm like, I can't make this flow. So no, it has to fit my sense of flow and pattern and the ability to make it work. There's lots of little details that I am organizing and beforehand instead of waiting to see how they work out and accommodating. And I think that's probably the neurodiverse trait coming out is I am setting up the organizational pattern before I have moved in. And as I'm picking out the houses, the other thing is I am completely unmoved by the aesthetics of the house. And so people are like, oh, well, look at that nice, gold mirror, that, great lighting. Okay, nice, yes. But how can I make something happen in that bathroom? That's what I'm thinking about. And so I feel like many times they're trying to sell me on the wrong components of the home.
The location was an issue for me. I am very sensitive to certain sounds and certain inputs. And our first house that we purchased was in downtown Minneapolis and too close to both fire and police.
Mm-hmm.
I found I wasn't getting much sleep at night. Every small sound at night, especially the sirens though, was jarring. And so the trade-off there became, well, we were close to public transit, but along with that came all of the noise and commotion of being near public transit.
Right.
So one of the things that I list in a house is that the house had to be far enough away from the airport, the bus station, the et cetera, so I could sleep.
Yeah, I can understand that. For me, it's not the exceptional noises, it's the everyday loud hum. That's what I can't be near because I cannot focus in that.
We have loud hum because we have fracking wells that were installed.
Oh, yeesh.
Which I find very unnerving, especially when the house is vibrating. I can tell, even though my wife says, what do you mean the house is vibrating? The house is vibrating.
Just trust me. Yeah.
And trying to have that make sense to her is difficult.
I think when you're talking about brain wiring, you're also talking about perceptual changes and a little more perceptually open and emphatic in some ways. So things that are ignorable to other people or easily ignored by other people may be a little harder for us to ignore.
You mentioned looking at the layout. I know that when we toured this development, one reason I chose the plan we did, which is one of the smaller plans, but it had a place for my office in the basement. I needed that because I need an office that is cool and quiet and somewhat insulated from the world.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I feel the same.
I will be looking out the window watching the squirrels and the birds and, oh, there goes a deer. And I would not be able to do my job. Did you analyze and assign roles to the rooms as well as the spaces within the rooms?
Yes. Nearly every single square foot of space of the house we ended up going with, I have decided upon. Every little space, every square foot, and I'm just like you, I cannot work if there's a window. It's a done deal. And you have to understand, I'm not like a neat freak. I'm not type A at all. Stuff is piled. But as far as understanding how things are going to get done in each location, I have fully assigned tasks and items and behaviors for each little tiny space, for each little area.
I'm not good with spaces overlapping purpose.
I know what you mean.
So my office is my office. It has my philosophy, my English, my writing books. It does not have anything I read for fun. It is my office. Upstairs, I have another bookcase that has, for lack of a better phrase, fun things to read for me.
Yes, my bookcases are divided as well between work things and popular things, and then things I have out so people can see and discuss. I have like conversational books.
I don't know that I have anyone over here to discuss them with. I know that for me, that flow that you mentioned, I really had to have certain spaces a certain way, or I just didn't like the house. What was the most important, when you talk about flow and organization, what was the most important aspect of that for your neurodiversity?
There have to be nooks. There have to be places for me to block out the stim at regular intervals throughout the house. I like being social. I have people over. My guy makes cheese. Game night is a thing around here. So, we're moderately social people. On the other hand, I need to know that there is a hidey hole pretty close to me most of the time. And so I'm looking for nooks, and I'm looking for places where I can make a nest, and I'm looking for places where there are layers where I can strategically let people in but still have privacy.
So do you find that working with your realtor, and thankfully we had a patient realtor, but did you find that you were saying no to things that he or she just couldn't imagine you wouldn't like?
We went around that. We avoided that, right? So we cheated the system. Instead of having the realtor show us everything, we kind of looked at things first and made sure they were okay for me, and then we contacted the realtor. So we went about it backwards to avoid that exact situation that you're talking about. We accommodated it. We accommodated it ourselves rather than asking the realtor to accommodate it.
Obviously, when you purchase the house, you're doing this. I don't know about your family situation, but I have a wife and 2 kids. And so we had to have our own floors. The basement is mine. And she has the top floor, which has a craft room and in her office. And there's a space in between that's a buffer zone. Do you find that you needed that privacy, that space that you could call yours when family, you love them, but you want to be alone sometimes? So when we were looking, I had to have that space. I could say, this room, I know it's only 10 by 10, but this is going to be mine.
Yeah, it was very much a plan for us because it's just me and my guy, and it's very much a plan for us to get a 3-bedroom place because we both wanted our own offices. The other thing was the bathroom, and I don't mind sharing a bathroom with him, but we both have our own closets. So, there's an interesting mix because sometimes, I'm with him because I like him and I do enjoy being in his space, and I think he enjoys being in mine. So there are times, when we want to snuggle and be close, and I want spaces to do that too. But I also want spaces where we can separate out and do our own thing. So it's just been kind of finding that right balance for us. The offices had to be separate. The closets had to be that way. And then the rest is actually fairly open floor plan with just little nooks and crannies that I can escape into.
And when you were going through the process of looking for a place to live, you said you had to first look for the right location, which I think everyone agrees with. We just have different ideas of right location.
What that means.
And you said so you didn't want to be near noisy places like high schools,
Schools, train
train
tracks,
tracks.
um, anything with a huge flow of people. I mean, I love my campus and there's great houses right behind my campus, but it's just too much. I want a low stim, small neighborhood. It was kind of funny. We looked at a retirement place and I was like, this is perfect. And they were like, you have to be 55 or older to buy here. And I'm like, oh, crap.
So that, but you like the quiet.
I do. I like the quiet. I don't mind children running around the neighborhood, but if we don't have to have them, even better.
Yeah, it's somewhat ironic. I sort of agree, but
But you are the one with the little children.
uh, yeah, it's one of the things that we looked at, and colleagues mentioned when I first got here. I was teaching in the city of Pittsburgh, and we live 30 miles away. And maybe coming from California and Minnesota to Pittsburgh, I didn't think 30 miles was a big deal. But I'd rather be in the suburbs. And a lot of people say, well, welcome to hell. But I like having space between my house and my neighbors. I don't want to hear their radio. I like having nature around me, and I love not having a lot of activity. I like the fact that the high school's on the other side of a
Right.
hill.
Yes. When we were looking for homes, our agent was like, "Oh, look at this! It's an attached housing, a really nice condo, great neighborhood, doctors, lawyers, bankers, people who make money, like live here. This is a great place." And I'm like, "We share," and I was like, "We have to share a wall? No way."
Yeah.
Not doing it, no matter how upscale the neighborhood is. I'm not living anymore attached to someone else's space. I need it emotionally and psychologically and just physically. I want to be able to go outside and walk around my backyard and manage that space unto my own way.
Well, one of the things that I have talked about with autism consultants is that they have found that some of their patients do better when they get to go to a summer camp or a retreat. And so I've asked, well, why don't you, with your neurodiverse clients, mention the suburbs as an alternative if they're always stressed in the city? And I constantly hear, oh, but cities are so much better. I'm like, okay, but how are they better if they're causing physical pain and stress for that person? They might be better for you, but are they better for your patient?
Right. I'm kind of a believer that honestly open spaces and sunshine and feet in the grass are just pretty good things for most people. It's not like I'm not anti-science or at all, any of those things, but I do think being outside in nature is kind of its own healing.
It's funny. We live near one of the largest parks in Pennsylvania and a lake. And one of the things I like to do after I drop the girls off at school is I drive by the lake.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice, right? It's sunny, you take a walk, you listen to the birds and the water lapping, and you focus on each sound and you understand what's happening in this whole other, world of nature and crickets and little bugs and fishies and turtles, and they all pop out, and you're like, oh, wow. Me being quiet allows me to see this whole other ecology.
Yeah, and I think that when we were looking for a house, that's one of the things that trying to explain to colleagues was difficult was I don't want to live next to campus.
No, no, too much energy and noise.
Do you find that when you chose this house, the process itself then becomes overwhelming? I know for me, I don't like conflict, I don't like stress. Nobody does, I understand. But I found that I was far less equipped to deal with a process I understood simply because it's you sitting across from the seller, you have your agent, their representative. It was a very stressful environment, this closing on a house.
Yeah, it's I mean, I would say for most people, in a financial sense, it's also their biggest financial investment most people ever do, right? Unless you own a massive business or something. Buying a house is the most you expect of your own financial acuity. So I would say it is at the top of most people's ability ranges. And if you're adding additional stressors on top of it, I can understand why it doesn't always go smoothly.
Did you come up with a strategy for dealing with the stress of this process? Did you set aside time to relax, or how did you manage this very big life step that everyone hopes to go through?
Thank you for asking. I'm very fortunate. My guy is amazing and understanding, and he has helped a lot in this. I also kept and I kept everyone who was involved on the same page. So I would say a lot of group communication. So I wasn't the only one bearing the burden of these choices. Because when the choice is shared, obviously that takes away some of the stress and you get to hear everyone else. So sharing that stress. The other thing I would say is self care is pretty important to me. As I was getting help, I learned about the importance of self care. Not that I do it perfectly or that I don't mess up and forget and get stressed, but when it does occur to me and I realize I'm overstressed, I do know some techniques to actually calm down and breathe and focus and reality test and, you know, kind of get back into it.
Do you feel a sense of relief that you're going to have this space that is your space?
Yes. So right now we're living in basically a condo. It's three condos in one building, right, broken up into three different condos, and it is an overwhelming amount of energy and noise and circumstance. And I am just so excited to move into the house.
I will say that my wife and I, when I first went to my PhD program in Minneapolis, we did not get a chance to tour the location other than the campus that made the offer. And so we rented an apartment across from the Mall of America.
Oh, wow.
I can say without any hesitation, that is the single worst location for a person with neurodiverse needs and sensory processing issues.
Hmm.
It has a train station, an amusement park, and it's the Mall of America.
Oh, good night.
If you can, I would suggest that anyone, but especially those with neurodiversity issues, look and tour whatever, do as much research as you can.
Yeah, I mean, try to find the space that you need and realize it's not just where the house is, but spaces inside the home too. You're really trying to arrange spaces where you can feel comfortable, but not shut everyone else out, right? Because sometimes you do want to be social and sometimes you do want to have share space with friends. And so it's really important that you find those balances where you can have your own space. You can have your own nooks and your own hidey holes, but also have space where you can share when you're comfortable and happy.
I don't know if you can relate to this, but I know my wife and I, one thing we wanted was separate double vanity sink.
Hmm.
She likes her space her way with her brushes and combs and whatever her way, and I like my space. We do have separate walk-in closet spaces.
Hmm.
Our offices are separate. Even our cooking,
Yep.
she uses a different part of the chef's island than I use.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've noticed she organizes things differently when she cooks than I organize.
Sure.
So, do you find that those little tiny details were important to you as you were looking? You mentioned closets that you wanted yours. Were there other things where you really wanted to say, honey, we can be next to each other, but I want this extra space?
I would say that happened most for me in the bedroom and the bathroom. For me, the bathroom is about the shower, right? I very much wanted um,
Huh.
I very much wanted that space to be open, to have sort of a walk-in shower feel to it, because I want to feel spacious in that moment, because that is one of the moments that I am absolutely alone. And it was important to me that I be able to be alone in a spacious place. Sometimes I want to be alone in a little nook. I want to be tight and ensconced, right, in a small space, nested. And that's one feeling that I sometimes crave. But another feeling I sometimes crave is, alone in a great big open space. And that was the shower for me. So there was that space. And of course, we usually shower one at a time just for schedule differences. So that worked out for me pretty well.
So it's nice to have that space that lets you feel open, which for me is our living room and kitchen, which is an open area. But I also like my small, secluded office where I feel like I don't know what the right word is. It's not cocooned, but it is my safe spot.
Mm-hmm.
So you looked for one of those too.
Oh, I looked for several, really. I looked for several and different sorts of them.
Interesting.
There are several places of varying spaces. So there are sometimes I do want to feel cocooned and wrapped up. And so a small closet, where I can put down some blankets and a flashlight and a book and read. Sometimes I want that small of a space, but sometimes I want to be alone in a big space, like the shower. And so that's me space too. And so it's everything. Everything has been arranged so I can have alone space and together space, and my alone spaces scale also depending on how enclosed, how separated from stimuli I need to be.
One of the things I am thankful for is that my wife is fairly flexible. She wanted to know, as long as she had her office and some of her room for crafts, she didn't really care what I wanted for my office space or, the kitchen. As long as it was usable, she was okay with it. So in some ways, I know that I was leading the process. Did you find that you were allowed to lead where you needed to go?
Yes, I think maybe one of the things that we do is attract people who are amenable to the sort of life that we need to lead. And I think my guy is one of those people. He's, as long as he has his space and his office and he can hang his Star Wars stuff, he's pretty happy.
I really appreciate that because I think that that's something we overlook is how I would not do well with someone like myself because we would be arguing.
Yeah, me neither. Over everything.
Oh, absolutely. And when people say, oh, well, you need another neurodiverse person, I'm like, yeah, that's not the best thing for me. I need someone who's very flexible.
I mean, anything can work, and good communication skills and patience and love go a long way to making any household better, I think. But yeah, I wouldn't want to marry someone who was like me.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate our time together.
I did too.
I think this is great for people to hear the different takes on life and some different perspectives on the autistic me. And of course, we've talked before, you are not an autistic individual, but you are neurodiverse.
Yes.
And I think that's also important, despite the name of the podcast, is to bring out that neurodiversity is many things, many people.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate your time, Professor Goldstein, on the Autistic Me podcast.
I enjoyed being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.